Good afternoon, and thank you for taking time away from your families and businesses to join us for this Epic Insight. This is Brian Lenz, Director of Sales here at Epic Retirement Plan Services, and I'll be your host for today's call, which, as you hopefully saw, is approved for a variety of CE credit. So if you did not do so during registration, please send your credential info over to marketing@epicrps.com so that Rowe can submit that on your behalf by the end of the week. Now on to the topic at hand. Retiring well is more than just a number. Many pre-retirees have a retirement planning need that goes largely unaddressed, and lifestyle and emotional changes that come with that retirement. In fact, only 35% of 50 to 59-year-olds say they've made a serious effort to prepare for the emotional aspects of retirement. Today, we're joined by Patrick Delany, a Vice President and DCIO Specialist at Rowe, to share their thoughts on how you can differentiate your approach to an underserved, financially mature demographic, provide an emotional approach to retirement planning, and strengthen your practice with this comprehensive, unique, and award-winning program. Patrick's strong communication skills, along with his deep financial experience, have helped him provide value to his clients as a DCIO specialist in the Great Lakes and Upper Midwest region. His mission is to help this diverse group of financial professionals who've joined us today elevate their businesses to higher levels, and he's focused on advisors, brokers, and record keepers like Epic to enhance their value add. As always, your line will be muted throughout the call, but if you have any questions you want me to run by Patrick as we conclude, please do enter those, and I will field them at the conclusion. With that, I'll turn it over to Patrick.
Thank you very much, Brian. And on behalf of Rowe, I want to thank Epic. They've been a great partner of ours over the years. I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of the home office folks and Brian for a number of years, and now I get to do so in a distribution field-based role. So thank you for the opportunity to spend some time with you this afternoon, and certainly thank everyone for dialing in and spending at least the 50 minutes required for the CE on this call this afternoon. So the name of the program and the presentation today is Visualize Retirement, and as Brian alluded to, we're talking about something unique, considering that we're all financial services professionals, and that is the importance of non-financial considerations when planning for retirement. And as we kick it off here, I want to ask you to do something for me really quick. Take 10 seconds and visualize your own retirement. All right. First few ideas, words, phrases, images that come to mind. Not a trick question. We'll come back to it in a little bit. So remember these images, words, phrases that you've thought of here. Now I want to tell you a little story, what I call the Esop Fable of the retirement planning industry here. There was a very wealthy, successful American investment banker, and he is on the Italian leg of a European vacation with his family. And before his family gets up one morning, he wanders down to the docks of the small coastal fishing village that he's in. And he's out on this pier, and through the morning mist, this one little boat with one fisherman pulls right up to the dock next to him. But in the back of the boat are several really nice looking European bass. And the American compliments the Italian on the quality of his fish and says, "How long did it take you to catch those?" And the Italian looks up at him and says, "Only a little while." The American said, "Well, why didn't you stay out and catch more?" And the Italian said, "What I've got in the boat here is all my family needs." The American said, "Well, what do you do with the rest of your time? So it's only 8 o'clock in the morning." And he says, "Well, sometimes I sleep late, I fish a little, play with my kids, take afternoon naps with my wife, and then in the evening I stroll into the town over there, where I sip wine and play guitar with my friends." Now that you mentioned it, it's not a bad gig. And the American laughs at him condescendingly and says, "Listen, I'm a very successful, wealthy American investment banker. I've got a Harvard MBA, and I think I can help you out of your little situation here. Because I know if you spend a little bit more time fishing, with the quality of those fish, you could buy a bigger boat. With the fish that you catch with the bigger boat, you could eventually buy several boats and own your own fleet. And at that point, you wouldn't have to sell your catch to the middleman. You could sell directly to the processor, eventually opening your own cannery. Now, at that point, you would own product, processing, and distribution. And that may necessitate that you move away from the small coastal fishing village to Rome or even to London in the UK or New York, where you'd have to run your expanding enterprise. The Italian laughs back at him and says, yeah, and how long is all that going to take? The American looks at him with a careful eye and says, what are you, about 50 years old? You give me 15 years and I can make that work for you. The Italian said, 15 years? And then what? The American said, that's the best part. You see, when the time is right, you announce the IPO, you sell your stock to the public, and you make millions. And at this, the Italian's eyes lit up. And he said, millions? And then what? The American said, then you retire. You move to a small coastal fishing village in Italy where you sleep late, you fish a little, play with your kids, take afternoon naps with your wife, and every evening you stroll into the town over there where you sip wine and play guitar with your friends. Now, it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek story there, but you think about how we position retirement planning and the key drivers of success and happiness in retirement. We say you've got to save, you've got to invest, you've got to make the money, you've got to earn the millions, and that will drive everything that you do in retirement. That's how we position it. Whereas you look at it from the eyes of the Italian fisherman, he had everything figured out. He had his vision, he had his strategy. He knew what he wanted to do, where he wanted to do it, who he wanted to spend his time with, and why he was getting out of bed every morning. And the money that he made from the fish that he caught was merely a mechanism to execute the tactics of the strategy. So for millions of Americans, they see money as the key of drivers and happiness in retirement. And you think about, how can we tell participants how much to save when we don't know, and a lot of times they don't even know what they're even saving for? You know, we call ourselves retirement planning experts or specialists, and oftentimes we overlook the most important part, which is the plan itself. So 3 things we are going to cover in the next few minutes. What are these non-financial, emotional, psychological, whatever you want to call it, conversations that pre-retirees need to have? Why should we be having this? Why should you be having these conversations? You are in financial services industry. A lot of folks have a legacy, expertise in numbers, quantitative analysis, investments. Why should we be having these emotional conversations with clients and their participants? And we'll give you some tools and resources to actually have these conversations with them to add value and deepen holistic relationships. So let's dive into number 1. What are these conversations pre-retirees need to have? And in order to do that, let's take a big picture view on what we're providing pre-retirees today. And you think about all of the content, the information, the resources that we make available. We essentially want to help people on this financial journey from striving to thriving financially. And so we dump a ton of time and effort, money, into helping them master and overcome the financial basics. We know that they need help with this because of these statistics. A lot of money goes to pay down debt. You can't cover an emergency. And 64% say finances are the number 1 source of stress in my life. That is an issue. So we deck a lot of time and effort and attention at this portion of the journey. You can see some of the stalks, if you will, on the top of the timeline, the things that help to solve or provide solutions to some of these issues. We know that from a defined contribution perspective, we have automated services, automatic enrollment, auto increase, QDIAs like target date funds that can also help move the needle in a positive direction. So that expedites their journey. They establish a baseline level of financial wellness, which as somebody who was tasked with creating T. Rowe's financial wellness resources almost a decade ago, I kind of roll my eyes when I hear the phrase financial wellness, but make no mistake, it is the top area of focus for plan sponsors today. These statistics are from 2017 and 2018. That 91% is up to 93%. If you talk about financial wellness, especially in the smaller end of the market, what plan sponsors will listen, especially as we are emerging from a pandemic that has shown an unfortunate spotlight on the lack of wellness within the employee demographic, emergency savings, budgeting, and so forth. They will listen if you want to talk to them about holistic financial resources and wellness. So we're expediting their journey here from striving to thriving now. If they're able to master the basics, establish a continuously improving level of financial wellness, they accumulate enough assets, they have the wherewithal at this point to hire an advisor, to work with a professional. And we know that when they hit around age 50, all of a sudden retirement planning becomes of paramount importance to that demographic. And as such, you see the statistic on the bottom, about half then end up reaching out and partnering with a financial planner or an advisor. And with your help, you expedite their journey to financial empowerment. You help them address more sophisticated financial planning needs like expediting a mortgage, retirement income planning, estate planning, and you're moving them over to the right side, which is thriving. And if this is a success story for all of us. And if somebody takes advantage of all of these stalks, if you will, the advantage of the services and guidance and advice that you are able to provide, that culminates in this statistic. You ask pre-retirees that utilize and allow themselves to be exposed to and take up the resources that we make available. 74% say, at this point in my life, I've made a pretty good effort planning financially for retirement. Let's all pat ourselves on the back. We can all go home and call it a day because this is a success story. The issue that we see here is that the financial journey is not the only journey that people are undergoing throughout the course of their lives. There is a parallel journey that they are embarking upon, and it's an emotional one, where they're going from striving to thriving financially. We are trying to get them also from scared to prepared emotionally. Now, you look at all of these things north of the timeline here that we make available to people as they move throughout the course of their careers to help them on the financial journey. Well, how does that compare to all of the resources and tools and guidance and advice that you make available to them to help them on the emotional journey? Right? It pales in comparison if we offer anything today, which is why, as Bryden said earlier, the key statistic here, that only 35% of pre-retirees can say, I've done a good job of preparing emotionally, psychologically for this transition that's going to take place in my life. That's what Visualized Retirement is all about. This is what we're here to solve, is to increase that 35% and get people from scared to prepared emotionally, as at the same time, we're helping them on that financial journey as well. Now, let's go back to the beginning. I asked you all to visualize your own retirement at the beginning of this presentation. What did you think about? Hopefully, it corresponds to a few of the pictures on the slide here. Hopefully, you thought about the people, the places, the things you were going to do. Hopefully, you did not think about your 401k balance, what the tax consequences of bequeathing a Roth account versus an HSA versus a pre-tax account to a non-spousal beneficiary. You greedy, shallow people. Hopefully it was not money. It was the who, it was the what, it was the where of your retirement visions. Because when you ask, or for homework, or even while you're listening to me, Google key drivers of happiness in retirement. What makes retirees happy? Inevitably, all of those answers will tree up the three key pillars. And guess what? Money is not one of them. The first one is lifestyle. How participants will spend their time. This is the who, what, where. When you ask people what their visions for retirement include, here are the top four answers. This is the who, what, where. Travel, spend time with family and friends, pursue hobbies, and an increasing amount of folks say work is going to play some role in their post-work lives, I guess, if you want to call it. The second pillar is healthcare. Now, I actually like just to say health as opposed to healthcare, because I think we as an industry have done a great job of scaring the heck out of people about the six-figure price tag that is hung on healthcare expenses in retirement. So Visualize Retirement was a little bit more of an aspirational program. We want you to have more positive conversations with individuals and participants. So when we think of healthcare, we think of, if you need care, who do you want on your team? More importantly, what role may you have to play on the care support team of somebody else? And what can you do today from a health perspective so that you are able to live the type of vibrant retirement lifestyle you want to? All right. And you can see here, healthcare is always a top concern for retirees and pre-retirees. So that's not going to go away, but it's how can we frame it and position it so that you are able to optimize and prepare for healthcare in retirement. And then the last one is meaning. And this one always, a few people always cringe at this. It's a sense of purpose. It's a sense of fulfillment in retirement. When we did an extensive field testing of visualized retirement with advisors across the country prior to releasing this program, and we brought up meaning, the phrase touchy-feely came up in more than one interview. They said, I'm a numbers person. I'm the financial person. I'm the investment person. I don't talk to people about something as touchy and feely as meaning. Well, guess what? Number one, having high purpose is really good for your health. Less likely to be afflicted with Alzheimer's, less likely to develop cognitive impairment, is likely to live longer, less likely to die young. I'll share with you a story about how important this is that I think you will be able to relate to, if not yourself, for someone in your family that you know, or certainly a client of yours. On October 24th, 2018, I looked on FI.com, which is SportsIllustrated.com. I'm a big sports guy, big Sports Illustrated fan. And on the front page of that website, the only thing you could see that day, big headline letters, was an open retirement letter from Lindsey Vonn, the skier, greatest female skier the planet has ever seen. Open retirement letter to her fans. The title of that letter was, How I'm Processing a Life Without Skiing. Think about that for a minute. What do you use that word process for? You don't say, I just processed the best vacation I ever had. No, you process getting laid off. You process a major health scare. You have to process a death in the family. But that's how she described her retirement from skiing. The first sentence of that letter said, announcing my retirement has been the greatest difficult reality I have ever faced in my entire life. Now, mind you, this is coming from a woman who has suffered 2 ACL reconstructions, an MCL dislocation, multiple meniscal repairs, 4 tibial plateau fractures, a spiral fracture of her humerus bone in her upper arm with a plate and 18 screws, broken ankles, broken fingers, multiple concussions, and she was Tiger Woods' rebound relationship after his marriage scandal. I'm telling you that because the woman has been through more than her fair share of physical and psychological trauma in her life. And yet retirement, she said, was worse than all of that. She goes on in the letter to say, who am I without skiing? What am I without skiing? Now, you don't have to have won 82 World Cup races to have those same thoughts. When you work with clients, you see it in your family. People who dedicate their entire adult lives to their craft, and all of a sudden they stop being the top doc or the top lawyer or the top teacher or the top police officer, and they become just mom or dad or grandpa or grandma, and they lose a sense of purpose and identity and meaning and fulfillment in life. And they will all tell you the same exact thing. Finding it in retirement is a lot harder than it sounds. That is why meaning is our third pillar on here. So hopefully we've explained the non-emotional, non-financial side. Why should you be having it? What's in it for you, I guess, is section number 2. Why is it important to you? Why would plan sponsors want you to bring this content to their participants? So let's go through a couple of reasons here. The first thing we'll say that there's a lot of people who want to have these emotional conversations, these non-financial, psychological vision conversations. 64 million people in this country, age 50 to 64. 10,000 of those people retire every day, hit age 65 every day. Now, we're saying that this program, kind of the ideal demographic is age 50 to 65. Okay, right before people move into that transitional phase into retirement. The reason that we want you to have these conversations with people as young as 50, or it's applicable, for 2 reasons. Number one, milestone birthdays tend to have an effect on people where they want to A, reflect, and then B, project. What does the next decade of my life look like? For me, who's not too far removed from age 40, I certainly can vouch for this. So what the heck have I been doing with my life up to this point, and what does the future hold? Also, for people as young as age 50, especially parents, they find themselves in a unique situation. 53, 54 years of age, all of a sudden the children are in college, out of college, out of the house, off the payroll, spouses look at each other and go, wow, we haven't been in this situation in 2 decades. What do the next 2 decades hold for us? They are ripe for this type of conversation. And the work you are doing with retirement plans is becoming more important. This statistic, 50% of Gen Xers rely on the advisor tethered to their retirement plan for advice, for guidance, for counsel on their financial lives. That statistic is up to 54% for Gen Y. And it makes sense because this is an individual's first experience with investing, with saving, with financial matters as an adult, with retirement planning. They graduate school at 22. They say, I've got a job today. I know I want to retire someday. How do I get from here to there? Okay, I've got to invest in a 401k or a 403b. I've got to figure out how much to save, company match, dollar cost averaging, power of compounding, age-appropriate asset allocation. Help me with this. You can foster a lot of loyalty and long-term clients as they start to rely on you more and more when they get into these plans. So the other thing is that it fills a resource gap. So again, go back to our financial and emotional continuum here. We are so laser focused on people's financial lives. Again, retirement planning, we often overlook the plan itself and just focus on how much to save, how much to invest, where to invest, and how much to withdraw every year. But we lose sight of how important the non-financial side is. So A, we're dealing with unique content because it's emotional in nature. And B, ask yourselves, take stock. What do you provide your pre-retirees today? My hunch is that it's one of the three, if not all of the three things above the timeline on here. We usually give them guidance around taxes. We usually give them guidance around Social Security strategies. And we usually give them some sort of retirement income calculator. So not only are we talking about non-financial content, we're doing it to a generally underserved demographic in the plan. Remember, a lot of our time and effort is focused on financial wellness, helping people overcome the basics, because that's where the masses lie. So many people need help with that. So you've got what is a financially mature and more attractive demographic, pre-retirees, who are generally underserved from a content standpoint, and you're meeting them where they are, because at this point in their careers, they've already received and been exposed to a ton of financial information, but they haven't really gotten into the non-financial or the emotional aspect of their upcoming transition. So it fills a resource gap. And because we're talking about non-financial things, we're not stepping on your toes. We're talking about on the left-hand side here, lifestyle, healthcare, and meaning. And certainly that doesn't conflict with anything that you're already bringing to bear in these relationships, which are financial services, guidance, products, solutions, and so forth. So it's complementing your financial offer. And it can also help you facilitate difficult conversations. So as someone who has done hundreds of employee enrollment and educational one-on-one meetings during the course of my career, I can't tell you how many times I would sit in a break room or a cafeteria and people would come in 15-minute increments. They'd slide their 401k statement across the table and say, Patrick, what do you think? Have I saved enough? And I would sit there and look at them and say, well, that depends. Enough for what? But when you help somebody develop their vision, you can assess relatively quickly whether or not their vision is an outsized vision compared to their actual financial preparedness. You know, they slide the statement across the table, say, oh, you got $24,000 saved here. They say, yeah, and my family's Greek, and I want to take my family every year, twice a year to Athens to relish in our heritage and culture. And I say, well, I can get you to Athens, Georgia. I don't think I can get you to Athens, Greece twice a year with what you've got here. The other beauty about doing this and this exercise with folks as young as 50 is that they have time to course correct. You can put an action plan in place to help bring the vision and actual financial preparedness in line with each other. And it is a repeatable, scalable process. So I'll show you in a couple minutes here the kind of the crux of these resources, but it's a workbook. It is a presentation where we're walking individuals through these 5 W's of their vision, kind of who, what, where, when, and why. And I'll show you the workbook in a moment. But when we ask advisors and we ask your colleagues out there, do you already do this today? Do you talk about lifestyle and emotion and fulfillment with people? And most of the folks that we talked to said, no, that's a little too touchy-feely for me. Some of them said, I do. And we asked them to explain their process. And they said, well, I've got a series of questions in my head. I break out my yellow legal pad, I sit across the table from somebody, and I jot down the answers. So what we heard, and this statistic on the screen validates it, is these types of vision conversations are very personalized. I mean, they're custom to each individual is going to have a different vision based on their preferences, behaviors, attitudes, and place in life. So there's a reason that more and more of your time is spent having client-facing conversations, meeting prep, meeting follow-up, client-facing responsibilities, and less of your time is being spent on investment analysis and monitoring and due diligence, because you can scale investment analysis. You've got technology that can help assist there. But things like helping people figure out their vision for retirement, it's a very customized process. So by giving you a repeatable process, the 5 W's, let's walk through this workbook, we're helping you make that portion more efficient of your time. And the last one I want to talk about here are retention implications. So you see this statistic here, 65% cited prompt phone callbacks as the main reason for jettisoning an advisor. Doesn't that feel like an extremely petty reason to get rid of somebody, to get rid of an advisor, somebody that you've had a 10 or 20-year relationship, or that your family has had a 10 or 20-year relationship with, or your organization has had a 10 or 20-year relationship with? And when you look under the hood of this statistic and really talk to people as to why these firings occurred, it wasn't because they didn't call them back. It wasn't because they didn't respond to an email in time. It was because there was nothing more to the relationship. It was transactional in nature. It was, they didn't really get me. I just didn't really have a good connection with them. And quite frankly, I'm looking for an excuse to switch advisors. And they didn't respond to my email, and so that's it. I've had enough of them. So you think under the hood, when you start to build more emotional, holistic connections with people, it goes a long way in fostering loyalty and, quite frankly, fostering retention and referrals as well. Now, let's talk about plan sponsors for a minute here. And there's a couple reasons I think that can also be shared with something like financial wellness programs. But the first one is under the very convoluted headline of workforce management flexibility. We go back to our timeline here. This is our emotional timeline from scared to prepared. And you see these 5 circles in the middle of the timeline, all of which could be employee benefit programs or employee benefit features that organizations make available to help people go from striving to thriving, from scared to prepared. Employer match, profit sharing. These are benefits that organizations spend a lot of time and effort and resources and money implementing, launching, deploying, maintaining over time. And so which of these helps somebody psychologically, helps somebody emotionally go from scared to prepared? You've got financial programs on the top, you've got physical programs on the bottom. But what helps somebody think about the psychological aspects of preparing for retirement? There's not on here. And what I'm not getting at here is saying, well, you got to make sure all of your old people are ready to retire so you can kick them out of the plan. What I'm saying is it gives HR units more flexibility to figure out maybe who they want to keep on in a part-time capacity, who they might want to keep on as a consultant in a mentorship capacity. I know T. Rowe Price, in fact, the portfolio manager of our small cap value fund, Preston Athey, retired, I think, in 2003. He still works for T. Rowe. Every time we hire a new investment associate anywhere in the world, we send Preston Athey there to mentor them, to bring them up on the culture and tradition and legacy of stewardship at T. Rowe Price and what we're all about and our global collaboration. And we can do that because Preston Athey was financially, emotionally prepared to retire. That's an extreme example, but if workforces are spending all of this time and money and effort on financial programs and physical benefit programs, and people still aren't retiring because they're going to lose their sense of identity and purpose and fulfillment, that is an issue. And programs like Visualize Retirement can help address that issue. And certainly from an organizational cost standpoint, it's no secret that older workers are more expensive to insure than younger ones. And also as a workforce ages, payroll costs, potentially workers' compensation costs, if you're talking about construction or manufacturing environments, they increase as well. And so the bottom line here is if employees are prepared financially, physically, and emotionally for this next transition of their life, it helps organizations manage their workforce better, and they've got more flexibility around long-term organizational costs. Here's a direct quote from one of the advisors that we spoke to as we were launching this. He said, one of the biggest conversations I'm having right now is the massive drag that older employees are going to be on the health benefit cost, and getting them to actually retire at 65, the savings alone to the company is massive. And just to put a bow on the second section here, these are the key drivers of people's decision to retire. And you think about, read these responses. Money doesn't come into the picture until the orange one, tied for fourth, and then you see it again all the way to the right. Certainly becoming eligible for government benefits has financial implications. But 4 of the top 5 answers are personal or emotional in nature. It's not driven by money. Non-financial considerations are actually a key driver of the decision to retire. And there's another financial advisor out of New York City, Laurel, who is actually a former healthcare, social worker turned financial advisor. If you ever want to read up on how important the non-financial considerations are, Google his name, and he writes columns for a number of online publications around the importance of to organizations and individuals about addressing these non-financial aspects of retirement. And this is one of the quotes from a Forbes article that he contributes to on a periodic basis. All right, that was section 2. Let's go on to section 3, and let's show you some of the resources and tools that we have available. And if I can do this correctly, I'm going to toggle here to our workbook. Hopefully everybody can see this here. So really the meat and potatoes of this vision exercise is a workbook. It is a presentation that can be printed. That the version I'm showing you here is actually a fillable PDF. We are launching this year a digital version of this workbook that people can do online. You can send the link out to participants. But as I alluded to before, this walks individuals through the 5 W's of retirement. And so I'll go slowly here, and then we'll give you an example of a couple. But it's who, what, where, when, and why. And you can see that all 5 of those W's tree up to either lifestyle, healthcare, or meaning. Now, let's focus in on who and what for a moment here. If anybody is familiar with adult learning theory, there is a key component of adult learning theory, and we leveraged it to make this workbook successful, to make it easier for people to go through this exercise. Because we don't want to say, here's what you need to do in retirement. Now write down who you think you're going to be spending your time with. Unlike children who learn best when they are disseminated information and they digest it in a classroom format and then regurgitate it through the form of presentations or tests or projects, adults have all this life experience that they're saddled with. And so they don't do very well when people are just telling them information. They like to draw on experience. I say they like I'm not an adult, I guess. I guess I'm an adult as well. We like to draw from life experience. And so the first question that we ask in 3 of these sections is not who are you going to spend your time with in retirement. It's tell us who you spend your time with today. If you look at the what section, rank this list and how you spend your time now. You go to the why section. What provides you with the most fulfillment or meaning in your life today? So we are getting them to first take stock, to think about their current situation, and that helps to facilitate a projection forward as to how that may change in retirement. And so we say, okay, reorder this list based on who you think you're going to spend the most time with in retirement after the initial transition takes place. So A, we're going to have them take stock, which helps to kind of build this groundswell and give them a mental base for each of these sections. And then the second thing that I like to accentuate when I take participants through this is, don't think about your entire 20 or 30-year time frame in retirement. Just give me the first 5 or 7 years. Like that's akin to asking a 25 or 30-year-old, hey, what do you think you're going to be doing for the next 30 years of your career? They're going to go, you're crazy. I have no idea what I'm going to be doing 30 years from now, but I can probably give you the next 5 to 7 years of my career and what I plan on doing then. So that's exactly what we want to take pre-retirees through. Tell us about your life today, the who, what, wheres. Now, how is that going to change just after this initial transition to retirement takes place? Now, and think about that. Most people have never gone through this exercise in a formal fashion. And so if people's definition of retirement is traditionally a complete cessation or severe cutback in work, all of a sudden they're going, wow, there's a big gap in my social circle that I'm going to need to fill. There's a big gap in my day-to-day, week-to-week time allocation that I need to fill. My entire identity and what drives me to get out of bed every morning is wrapped up in my job. Holy crap, I really need to do some thinking about how I'm going to fill those gaps. And that's what this is designed, again, to do. At the end of each section, there is a next step. People force them to take action or write an action item. And now, these action items do not need to be earth-shattering. For example, in number 1, probably former work colleagues is going somewhere near the top of this stacked rank list. All right, and then it's probably going to go to maybe 5 down here. And for an action item, I say, well, I really like my colleagues. I still want to maintain relationships with them. Maybe I just need to have a conversation with my buddies at work after I retire, where we can do a weekly happy hour or a monthly lunch or dinner or some sort of social gathering on a periodic basis. For the what, now, an action item might be, well, I really want to watch my grandkids on a daily basis when I retire, but I know that my son-in-law doesn't want me anywhere near the grandkids on a daily basis. Maybe I need to front run that with a conversation and iron out the expectations for what my time involvement is going to be as a caretaker for my grandkids on a day-to-day basis. It could be as simple as having a conversation with somebody. It could be as complex as researching volunteer opportunities or nonprofits that you want to serve on the board of. But the key is to write a simple next step or action item for each of these things. And then when you get to the end, theoretically, if you're going through the who, what, where, when, and why, you should be able to write your retirement profile. I liken it to the dust jacket of my retirement autobiography. And as somebody who was the primary developer and writer of this content in a former role, you can see my example has unfortunately made it in here to the actual workbook that we make available to all of you. But you should have a good idea of the who, what, where, when, and why, and that can be used along with your action items to populate the retirement profile. This is the presentation that follows the chronology of the workbook. So depending on the format, if you're doing one-on-one meetings, you might just want to use the workbook sitting across the table from people. If you're doing group settings, what you do is we can send you as many copies of the workbook as you need, and you can present this, and certainly we're happy to co-present it with you to the extent that you feel comfortable. But the point is that whether you're doing it in a live group setting or individual one-on-one meetings, you can use the workbook, you can use the presentation, and the workbook and presentation follow the same chronology, so they can be used in tandem with each other. The last thing that I will show you from a resource standpoint, we have conversation starters, which are participant level or individual investor level pieces of content on a specific topic around one of the 3 pillars: lifestyle, healthcare, or meaning. And this is an easy way. We want to give you kind of snackable, digestible content. You can see a lot of this is kind of infographic-y on a topic that is important to retirees or pre-retirees, in this case, planning for healthcare costs, giving them a chart of the different features and benefits of pre-tax versus Roth versus HSA contributions. And it gives you a periodic drip. If you want to drip content on plan sponsors, or if you want to drip content on individual clients and participants, these conversation starters give you a way to do that. And then most of the time, one of the action items is going to lead back to you for more information or other resources, or to talk, consult with a financial professional about this. So certainly something that you want to stay relevant, stay in front of people with compelling topics on a periodic basis, these conversation starters. We produce them generally quarterly, and we usually try to use surveys or research from retirees and bring that to a pre-retiree audience. So one of the best ways to figure out what life is like in retirement is to ask the experts, ask the people who are living it, and then bring that insight information into a pre-retiree audience so they can understand some of the thoughts and behaviors and preferences of retirees. The last thing that I will show you, and we'll kind of wrap up here with a couple quotes. So I want to focus your attention on the bottom one here, which is from Financial Planning Magazine about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago. It says, relationships and meaningful conversations aren't lost arts. They'll be at the center of what financial planners do. These are not skills replicable by a robot. So again, as we were researching and doing a lot of investigative work around the importance of non-financial considerations, and particularly how it pertains to your business and your value proposition, these were some of the findings that we were able to unearth in a number of advisor and financial service publications. And the one on the bottom strikes me because I feel like we're undergoing a little bit of a revolution or disruption within the financial services industry right now. And certainly COVID has served as a catalyst to expedite this. And it's a technological disruption. And specifically that word robot stands out to me because I think you go back to that one statistic we saw that less and less time is being spent on investment analysis because you can scale it, because quantitative comparisons and evaluation can be done easily through technology. And you think about technology infringing upon your value proposition there, where there might be robo-advisors, people tend to cringe at that thought. And I liken it to a similar industry that was disrupted by technology a few decades ago. You bear with me on this analogy. The late 1980s, early 1990s was the height of the travel agent industry in the United States. At that time, there were about 130,000 travel agents nationwide. And then what happened in the early and mid-90s? The internet happened. AOL and Netscape and internet service providers. The internet happened. The information superhighway came in, and everybody was so quick to predict the demise of the travel agent. Wow, these people who book tickets and build flight itineraries. You don't need to do it. Everyone can do it themselves through Expedia and Orbitz and Travelocity and all these other different services. Well, they all thought travel agents were going to go the way of the dodo, and they looked at the travel agent industry and the relative health or unhealth of it a few years ago. And what they found was rather astounding. 90,000 travel agents still exist today. So far from extinct, and what they found was that they make far more money than they ever did pre-internet, simply because their value proposition evolved from being transactional on booking your plane ticket, your train ticket, your cruise itinerary, and they became an individual or a family's one-stop travel concierge. They started to build more holistic, emotional relationships with their clients, and they were able to charge more for it, and they stopped being transactional in nature. Now, instead of just booking a plane ticket, if I happen to leave my passport on the pylon of a pier of a small coastal Italian fishing village, the travel agent would be on the phone or on email through every American embassy and consulate to make sure that I had a replacement passport by the time I left Italy and moved on to France. Or they know that my oldest daughter loves the ballet, and they would make sure that if we were going on a trip, to have tickets to the Vienna Ballet for me, or tickets to my beloved yet terrible Baltimore Orioles if we went to an away series in Toronto this summer. And I think that's very akin to kind of what you're being forced and asked to do by clients. And visualize retirement as a springboard into some of those more holistic, emotional conversations. And it gives you a repeatable way to do it. You've got a workbook. You've got a presentation that gives you the framework to have those types of conversations. So we will be happy to follow up with the workbook, the conversation starters with the presentation as a follow-up to this. And I will turn it over at this point back to Brian and see if any questions have filtered in through the chat or otherwise.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. As Patrick mentioned, if you have anything you want to run by us, please do enter that in the questions panel. While those are rolling in, Patrick, maybe a thought or just clarification. You mentioned that money isn't really on the top 5 list of people's retirement considerations, but obviously it relates in some way, shape, or form to many of the things they want to do and be enabled to do in retirement. Kind of to distill everything you just said, are you suggesting that the best way to connect that is by maybe reversing the order of that conversation and starting with the emotional curation and visualization, and then once they've kind of opened up with that, backing into the how financially rather than starting with the numbers?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And again, I go back to the kind of rhetorical question we asked at the beginning of this, and is on the front page of our participant workshop, is how can we tell you how much to save? We kind of blanketly recommend you should be saving 10 or 15% every year. You should withdraw no more than 4% off your stream of income. But how can we credibly do that if we don't even know what people are saving for? And it's especially when you're trying to reach as many participants as possible in any given quarter or year, it's really difficult to have those hands-on personalized conversations with every single one of them like you would wealth management clients. So to me, it's intuitive to start with, well, let me talk to you about what your goals are. Then let's put into place a financial plan to help you get there. Let's marry one side of the equation to the other. Now, we certainly have talked to a number of advisors about this program, and they immediately shut us down and say, listen, none of this is their words, none of this emotional crap matters if they don't have the money to execute. But to me, I would say, I would submit that how can you tell them how much to save and what the financial side of it is if you don't really know what they're spending that money on or going to?
Right, makes sense. And I guess bringing that back to the retirement plan side of things, your favorite topic of wellness, you rattled off some stats about how high a priority it is for business owners to focus on that. It was a little surprising to me and to hear you say, particularly in the small employer space. Do you have any insight into the why of wellness? Is it as simple as making sure that there are transition plans for elderly workers? Or I guess to ask it a different way, we at Epic are seeing very few small employers really championing any sort of wellness initiative. So if they're saying that it's a big deal for them, but not stepping up to engage with it, what's the disconnect, and how do we bridge that gap?
Yeah, good question. I think, and I'll just be clear about one thing. I certainly think the adoption and implementation of wellness programs is exponentially higher the more you go up market. To your point, it's almost impossible to get a small business to prioritize and focus on a retirement plan, much less what many people consider to be an add-on, which is the financial wellness solution component of a broader retirement strategy. So, I think that I've seen the pandemic reinvigorate, if you will, that topic among business owners in general or organizations in general. And the organizations that have been hit the hardest have been small local businesses over the past year. But I think in general, wellness suffers from an intention and action gap. 92% of plan sponsors want to focus on it. And in the small end of the market, you probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 to 20% of plan sponsors have actually done anything about it. we have resources to make it real for them, to put pen to paper and not just say, oh, well, let's put on this technological solution and people can access content if they want to. Wellness is not information. If that was the case, that I should be in the best shape ever because I have a gym membership. That doesn't mean that I'm going to go and actually make my time productive there. I know that I need to be healthier. I have access to it, but that doesn't mean I'm doing it. Wellness is about behavior change and routine over time. And plan sponsors need to set goals, both for their organization and the individual, and they need to make sure that their success metrics are in line with those goals. When you ask HR departments what their biggest objectives are for financial wellness, their top three answers are employee satisfaction with our organization and benefits, recruitment, and retention. But yet we, in the retirement space, are measuring success based on things like average account balance, loan rates, average deferral rates. But that's a huge disconnect in general. And I think that advisors and providers and partners out there who work with plan sponsors can dumb it down. I guess that's a bad phrase, but just make it simpler and say, what are the goals of the program? What does your organization want to achieve? And what do you want your employees to achieve? Because you talk about things like recruitment and retention and employee satisfaction. Those are goals that the organization wants. But you also want people to be less stressed, be more productive, pay down their debt, increase their savings, save $1,000 for an emergency. And so there's a lot of layers to a financial wellness conversation that I don't think people are having, because I think they're just slapping on a solution, giving link people to content and saying, there's our financial wellness solution. And it's not working for those reasons.
Sure. And I guess tying that back into what you all are bringing to the table through the workbook and the soon-to-be online version of that, does it require really a shepherd to take in those answers and come up with some action items for that individual, or do you guys have based on what you've said here, here's what you can do type of response built right into the resources you're offering?
It's almost as if I had set that question up for you, although I can assure you that we didn't. But there is let's call it Visualize Retirement 2.0 presentation that is in development now. And that's one of the pieces of feedback that we heard from advisors when we launched this last year was, all right, you really set up the non-financial side and the emotional side really well and tell us why it's important and give me ways to broker those and facilitate those conversations with people. And then now how do I bridge that to financial resources or best practices or considerations? And so this 2.0 is actually going to take this content a step further. Whereas again, we don't want to do what advisors are doing, and we don't want to step on their toes, but we do want to kind of bridge the gap a little bit more and say, well, think about your income needs. Here's 3 to 5 important considerations of your spending needs. Now, think about how you're going to be funding that. What are your different sources of retirement income? Is it going to be mainly from a defined contribution plan? You're going to have Social Security. Do you have defined benefit or pension? Do you have outside investments? So 2.0 is actually going to take that further step and give some kind of financial considerations or best practices now that you've established the vision.
Fantastic. We will look forward to having you back on for 2.0, and thank you to Patrick and T. Rowe Price for their time today and insight. As a reminder to everyone on the phone, this is approved for various CE credits, so if you did not enter that when you registered, please email marketing@epicrps.com with your credential information by the end of this week so that T. Rowe can submit that on your behalf. And we will send out a copy of the presentation and a recording, as well as the workbook that Patrick shared with you all as a follow-up email. Most importantly, wish you safety and health as you support your families, colleagues, and clients. And please don't hesitate to reach out to us if Epic can do anything to support you. Thanks again, all, and have a great evening.